Hey, good morning everyone, it's Michael with Colorcubic, and I'm back again, picking up where we left off with this bolt modeling tutorial. First off, before we begin, I just want to apologize to everyone for leaving you hanging. This has been a pretty, heavy year for me as far as my schedule goes. Just working with some clients and, wrapping up a lot of product for Colorcubic, specifically a preset plugin for Cinema 4D called Scene Light. So that's something that we plan on rolling out fairly soon here. And but yeah, I wanted to really make a more concerted effort to wrap up. There's a couple tutorials, this being one of them, that had a part 2 that I didn't finish, and I feel pretty bad about that. I don't like to leave things hanging. Unfortunately, this just wasn't priority on my list of to-dos, but I'm in a pretty good place right now to be able to pick this up again, and have definitely set my schedule up to publish these more consistently, because I think that the results I was getting and the people that I was helping, it seemed to all be positive. So what do they say? Don't ruin a good thing, right? Or don't end a good thing, something like that. I don't know. Anyway, let's get started. Let's jump into this, because there's not really a whole lot left to do, but it definitely requires some attention to detail. So with that said, this is essentially where we left off. So you can see here we have the crucial element of our bolt shape, right? So we have the cylinder, and then we have these rivets that make up, or they're comprised of these 5 teeth. Now, I had one viewer comment that this is pretty unusual when it comes to bolts, right? Like generally, it's just one tooth that makes up the rivets, not 5. And I tried that. I tried coming up with a few solutions, and I probably need to spend more time with it. But when extruding the end caps, I was running into some problems. So I think there's a way to get around it. But with that said, for this one, I think this will work. It'll be fine. It'll definitely sell the end product. So right away, though, we're just going to be working with caps 1 and caps 2, like you see here, which are both identical. They just make up both ends of this bolt. And so you can see here that the caps 1 and caps 2, they're comprised of this circle and then the teeth that make up the rivets. So the circle makes up the sphere, or the cylinder, and the teeth make up the rivets. And how we achieved this bolt with these 2 end caps was by utilizing a sweep NURBS with a cogwheel and a helix spline. So again, it was a pretty unorthodox method, but the reason I like this method is because if by saving this down into one whole object, the polys, if I wanted to, say, export this as an OPJ, open it in Blender or open it in Maya, it would work, right? It wouldn't. I wouldn't need to fake it. So that's important too. That when you're modeling with in mind, in case you ever have to pass off your work or pass off your model to someone else working in a different 3D program. So if your only option is OBJ, it's not a loss, right? Like the model will still import correctly. So those are just some good tips to be aware of when you are modeling. Make sure that you stay away from things like Bools, like those are, I just, if I can avoid using bools, I won't use them. And other things that are proprietary to Cinema 4D. So with that said, I don't want to, take up the majority of this time just talking about things completely unrelated to the video. So let's really jump into this. Let's really get started. So I'm going to come to Cap 2, and what I want to do first, and for those of you who've forgotten, to rotate around your object, to rotate around your 3D object, you want to hold down the Alt-Option key on your keyboard. So hold that key down, and then click and drag with your mouse to the left or right, and or up or down, and that'll rotate around your 3D object. Just a good tip. It saves you from traveling all the way up here into these with these tools. These are helpful, but sometimes you want to be able to just rotate around your object. So yeah, I'm facing Cap 2, and I have my live selection tool selected, and I also have my surface polygons tab enabled. So right there. So the very first thing I want to do is grab the circle for this end cap. I don't want to grab the teeth and the circle, just the circle. So with that circle selected, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to come down to extrude. Now in here, the one thing I want to do is I want to come over here to my attributes window for my extrude tool. And in the options tab down here for the offset, I want to change the offset to 0.1 centimeters. Press enter, and that'll extrude that end cap. So now I want to come back up to my live selection tool, click off the screen to deselect, and then I want to select this again, right click, come to extrude again, only this time in the attributes window for my extrude tool. In the options tab, I want to adjust the offset from 0.1 centimeters to 5 centimeters. Press enter, and you'll see that'll extrude that cylinder. Now right away, if I come over here to my objects manager and I just deselect the Cap 2, you can see the Phong angles are distorting, and that's okay. We'll fix that. The one thing that we want to be concerned about is that it's just extruded enough for us to create our bolt shape from, the bolt head. So let's go back to Cap 2. And now, because the surface of the cylinder is selected, let's go ahead and deselect off the screen in the perspective window. Now, what we want to do is we want to press the U key on our keyboard. So U as in unicorn, and then we want to press L as in loop for oops, that's not what I want to do. U as in unicorn, L as in loop, and that's for loop selection. And we just want to select the circumference of this cylinder. So all of these polys right here. And with that selected, I'm going to right click, come down to extrude, and this time I'm going to come over here to the attributes window again for my extrude tool. In the options tab, I want to change the offset from 5 centimeters to 3.5 centimeters. And then press enter, come back to my live selection tool, click off screen to deselect, and there we go. So we're almost there. We're almost there. Next, while we're still in the Surface Polygons tab, I want to press the U key on my keyboard again. So U as in unicorn, L as in loop for loop selection. And now I just want to grab the surface of these polygons. So just that selection there. Right click. And I'm going to come down to melt this time. So there we go. Next, let's go back up to our live selection tool. And now we're going to come to our edge selection tab. And with this selected, I'm going to press the U key on my keyboard again, and then L as in loop for loop selection. And I just want to grab the circumference of this top edge of the cylinder for this bolt head. And you want to make sure that you grab just the circumference and not something like that. You can see how it shifts off. So you have to be a little precise. There we go. That looks good. And with that selection, I'm going to right click. I'm going to come down to bevel. And in the bevel attributes window for the bevel tool, I want to come to the tool options tab. And in the offset, I'm going to change this to, let's try 3 centimeters. That should do it. That looks good. Now I'm going to go back to my live selection tool and then click off the screen to deselect. And now I'm going to come back over here to my objects manager and just click off to deselect from the cap 2. Now I wanted to show you what's happening. We're still dealing with these Phong angles. Now there's two ways to deal with this. The first way is that we go to the cap 2 and we come to the Phong tab, and in the angle limit in the tag properties, we check this box. Now, if I deselect the cap 2 in my objects manager, you'll see that fixed the Phong angles, but we're getting this little partition here. And the reason we're getting that is because it's reducing the angles in the Phong. So, it's not as smooth, right? And the one way to fix that is you can apply a hyperNURBS to that, or a subdivision surface. And that'll clean that up, but then that'll increase the the number of polys in your model, and if we can keep this reduced, that's what we want to do. So let's go back to cap 2 and let's uncheck the angle limit for our Phong. And for cap 2, we're still in the edge selection tab. We want to press the U key on our keyboard again. So U as in unicorn, then L as in loop for loop selection. And we just want to grab the back circumference of the bolt head. We also want to grab down here this circumference. So make sure to grab the one at the base of this bolt head, but not this one. Just this one here. And now that we have both of those selected, and to ensure that both of those stay selected, or you're making a double selection, you want to hold the shift key. So let me just repeat that again. So U as in unicorn, L as in loop. You grab the circumference of the back of the bolt head, and then hold the shift key down, and then grab the base of this as well. There you go. Those are two selections. So now we're going to right click, come to bevel, and in the attributes window for our bevel, in the tool option tab, we want to change the offset to 0.05 centimeters. There we go. And now I'm going to come back to the live selection tool and then click off the screen in my perspective window to deselect. And then I'm going to come over to my attributes window and then click off to deselect from the cap 2. And voila, look at that. Nice and clean. That's how it should look. You can look at the base here. That's nice and clean. So we're there. We're almost there. This is a really there's only one part of this that might get a little complicated, and I'm gonna save that for last. But yeah, this is looking nice and clean. Hopefully, the steps that you've taken to follow along are garnering the same results. So let's go ahead and shift gears, and let's come over here to cap 1. And by the way, if whether you're working on cap 1 or cap 2, it makes no difference. The results will be the same because they're identical, right? So if you decided to do that with cap 1 instead of cap 2, just make sure that you're switching now. So for me, cap 1, I'm going to go back to my surface polygons tab right here, and then I need to make sure that my live selection tool is selected. Now, key point, I never make selections with my move tool. The reason why is when you make a selection, unfortunately, at times it inadvertently will make the selection while simultaneously moving that selection. And so you want to avoid that by always using the live selection tool to make your selections. Just some good pointers right there. So with that one surface, the circle selected, what we're going to do is we're going to right click again, come down to extrude, and in the attributes window for our extrude tool, in the options tab, we're going to change the offset to 0.1 centimeters. There we go. Let's press enter. And now we're going to right click again. Oops, sorry. We want to come back to live selection tool, click off the screen to deselect, select the surface again, right click, extrude. And this time we can actually just click and drag to the right just to measure this. And let's just make this, let's see, what does 1.5 centimeters look like? That's not bad. Maybe, let's make it 1.25. Okay, that should work. All right, so let's change the offset value to 1.25 centimeters. And now what we want to do is we want to come to our scale tool, and we just want to scale this down ever so slightly. So you can click anywhere off the screen in the perspective window, click and drag to the left. There we go. Actually, if you hold down the Shift key, it'll reduce it by a value of 10. So that looks good, 80%. And now I'm going to go back to my live selection tool and then click off the screen to deselect. Now I'm going to come back to my Objects Manager window and then deselect Cap 1. And again, we're getting these weird Phong angle issues for our polys. And that's okay. We're going to follow the same steps to clean this up. But right away, we're getting a, I mean, it's looking a little bit phallic, but we're getting some pretty good results. So let's zoom in here, and in my Objects Manager, I'm gonna select Cap 1, and this time I'm gonna go back to my Edge Selection tab, and I'm gonna press the U key on my keyboard, and then L is in loop for loop selection. And again, we're just going to grab the circumference of the cap, and make sure you don't grab, something like that. We're just grabbing the circumference. So you have to be a little careful when you're making that selection. And with that selection made, let's right click, let's come to bevel, and excuse me, this value is fine. So 0.05 centimeters is what we want. So in the offset, let's just press enter, and there we go. Go back to my live selection tool, and then click off the screen in my perspective window to deselect, and deselect in my Objects Manager, and look at that, nice and clean. So that looks really good. That's what we're looking for. All right, so the general shape for our bolt is it's done. We're done. Now we just need to work on whether or not we want to make a Phillips or flathead back. I'm going to go with the Phillips just because it's a little more complicated, and you should be able to extrapolate how to do a flathead if you decide to from this process. So this took me a couple tries, and again, the reason I'm doing this instead of using a bool tool is for the reason I explained earlier, which is I don't like to use the bool tool if I ever need to make a model that I'm going to pass off in, say, Blender or Maya, because the bool tool is proprietary to Cinema 4D. It's not proprietary or native to Blender or Maya. So again, stay away from using things like that are proprietary to those 3D programs. If you plan on exchanging models, it's not going to work. They won't read them. The way that you can get around it is by, extruding, extracting, cutting out elements and objects in your model, making sure that the model is editable, and then you can pass it off and save it as an OBJ. But a bool, that won't be recognized, and so you would just get the intersecting object that's used to extrude or extract that shape from this one. So both of those shapes would show up, both of those objects would. It's a little complicated to explain, but yeah, just trust. All right, so the next thing we want to do is we want to come over here to our perspective window, and the upper right corner, we want to select this window. Then we want to come down to the back window and press that same box. Now, right away I can tell this is the back of the bolt head. This is the front of the bolt. So the small tapered part. So we want to come over here to camera, and we want to change this from back to front. And now we just need to zoom in again. And again, we can achieve this by either scrolling with our mouse or using this tool up here in the upper right. All right, so in our front window, here's what we're going to do. This is for Cap 2. We need to enable a cube. Now, with this cube enabled on the screen, it's really blown up. So we're like, whoa, what happened? We want to come down here to the Objects Manager for the attributes, the Object tab of our cube, which is in the Attributes Manager. So let's just reduce the X value. There we go. That looks pretty good to me. Maybe 3. No, let's do 2. Let's do 2. And then we need to reduce the Y value. There we go. And let's do 7. That looks good. All right, so 2 for the X value, Y for the 7 value. And so 2 centimeters and 7 centimeters. Now I want to duplicate my cube. So I'm just going to, with the cube selected, hold down the Command key if you're on a Mac, the Control key if you're on a PC, and then click and drag up to duplicate that. And with this new cube selected, let's come over here to the coordinates, and we're just going to rotate the B value in the rotation. And we just need to rotate it by 90 degrees. Negative 90, 90, it makes no difference. There we go. Just deselect off the screen. And right now I'm going to switch my camera view. So I'm going to come back up to this right box here in my front camera window. And let's go to our right camera window. So right over here, same box, click that just to zoom in. We're going to zoom in again. And we're just going to select in our Objects Manager window, I'm going to select both of these cubes. So you can either hold down the Shift key and select both, or you can hold down the Command key if you're on a Mac and select both, or the Control key if you're on a PC to select both, to make both of those selections. And let's go to our Objects tab and our Attributes window for our cubes. And we're just going to reduce the size just to shrink it down. It doesn't need to be reduced all the way. We just want a general shape. And let's zoom in here a little bit more. There we go. I think, oops. That should work. Let's see what this looks like. Awesome. So what we want to do next is we want to exit the right camera window. So this is the window we were in. Let's come back up to this upper right window, select that. Let's go back to our front window, select that same box. And so here's where the fun begins. And I'm being a little facetious because it's really not fun. It's a little more tedious, and it takes a couple times to get this. But I promise you it's worth it. So before we get started, what we want to do is we want to come over here to our Enable Snap. Make sure that that's turned on, so make sure it's highlighted. After it's highlighted, select and hold this, and make sure that you have Edge Snap and Spline Snap turned on. And once those are enabled, they didn't shut off. So once those are enabled, we want to come over here to our Edge Selection tab. And now what we want to do is, with our Cap 2 selected, because this is what I use for the bolt head, I want to right-click and come to Knife. And what's going to happen is my knife selection is essentially going to run along the spline of these cubes. It looks like it's a little. I'm going to go back to my cubes in my Objects Manager, and I'm just going to adjust the coordinates so it comes up a little bit. There we go. And I also, what I want to do here is, with both of these cubes selected, I'm going to come to my Basic tab, and I'm going to enable X-ray. So that's turned on now. Now this should ensure that when I'm making the cuts in my bolt head, that it's not interfering with these two cubes aren't interfering with the selection for the knife. So let's go back now to our Cap 2 in our Objects Manager. And again, we're going to right click and come to Knife. And we were just using, it doesn't seem to be recognizing this. It's a little fickle sometimes. So you really have to be patient with this. Sometimes I get the selection just right, sometimes I don't. So let's try this. Let's give it a shot. I'm going to click, and I'm just going to drag while holding the Shift key, and I'm going to drag all the way down to the end part here. And so it looks like it made the selection, but it's slightly off. You can see that. So we can try this again. Let's try this again. Let me just press Command Z to undo that, or Control Z if you're on a PC. Let me go back to my enable snap, and let's disable. Let's disable spline snap, and then let's also disable vertex snap. So we're just going to keep the edge snap. Let's see what happens here. Okay, this might work. This might work. All right, so we just want to drag this window up slightly because I can't see the base. There we go. All right, so we're going to grab the selection, hold down the Shift key, and then grab that selection too. Boom, there we go. Look at that. Nice, clean cut. Now, when I'm using the knife tool, I like to toggle back and forth between the live selection tool and the knife tool, just because if I just keep the knife tool enabled, it starts to jumble up sometimes, and I don't like that. So that's a really horrible way of explaining what the knife tool is actually doing. It will start to, so let's say, for example, I come up here to this end and I start to make a cut, it'll carry the cut over from down here up here. So you'll get this weird cross cut. And to avoid that, just press the space bar to go back to the live selection tool, and then press the space bar again to toggle back to the knife. Really quick and easy. All right, so now we're going to do this end. Let's click and hold with our mouse, hold down the Shift key, drag down, and let's drag all the way to the end. And it looks like that didn't work. So let's try this again. Click and hold with our mouse, drag down. And we're still getting that weird selection. Huh. All right, let's try this again. See, this is what happens. It's a little fickle, unfortunately. There's just no way around it. That's not working. So, you know, if it comes down to it, if it comes down to the fact that this just isn't going to work, or it's more frustrating than anything, then you know, there's a different way to do this. It's not as accurate, but you essentially get what I'm trying to achieve here. So let's go ahead and undo this first cut, because this doesn't seem to want to cooperate, and I apologize. So let's go back to our live selection tool, and let's now come back to our objects manager, and let's just minimize these cubes off the screen. And you can achieve that by you know, double clicking both of those buttons, those radio buttons on the side, so they turn red. And now with our end cap 2 or cap 2 selected, let's go back to our display, and I'm going to change this from garage shading lines to hidden lines, just so we can just see the wires that make up the bolt head. It'll make it a little bit easier to cut and to count, which is what we need to do. So we're just going to utilize the top and the left to measure the distance that we need to cut. So with our edge selection tool selected, I'm going to right click, come down to knife. Now we can tell this is the middle of the middle intersection of the bolt head right here. So let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, and let's just go 5. So here we go. We're gonna cut from right here. So click and hold that, and then hold down the Shift key and drag all the way down. And wonderful. We're still not getting these selections. Man, this is there we go. There we go. There's the selection. That's what I wanted. Okay. So again, this is the middle. So we're just going to do opposite of that. So right here, we're going to grab this section, click and hold with your mouse. See, this is why I forgot to toggle back. So I forgot to toggle back to the live selection tool. So I'm going to press the Command Z to undo that. Spacebar again, go back to my my knife tool, and let's click, hold down the Shift key to drag. Boom, let's grab that edge. So not bad, right? It's it should be fine. It should be fine. The measurements aren't completely off. They seem like they should work. So now let's toggle back to our live selection tool, and let's toggle back to our knife tool again. So now we're going to go from left to right, and we're going to go 3 down. So here's the center. So 1, 2, 3. Let's grab this edge here, click and hold with my mouse, hold down the shift key, and then just drag across. Okay, undo that. That selection didn't work. Let's try it one more time. There we go. There's our selection. Toggle back and forth between our live selection tool and our knife tool. Here's the center. So 1, 2, 3. Let's grab this edge, click and hold with my mouse, hold down the shift key, drag across. There we go. Oops. Let's do that again. Might take a couple times. There we go. There's the selection. Okay. So now that we have these selections made, let's exit our front view camera. So we come up here to the upper right, press that box. Now let's go back to our perspective window. So we can come over here to the upper left. For our perspective window, press that box in the upper right, and here we go. You can see in all of its glory the cuts that we've made to create our the general shape for our Phillips indentation. And it's looking pretty good. It's not as accurate as I would like, but you know, it works. It's going to work for what we need. So here's where the fun begins. This took a couple tries for me to really get right. And I'll be honest, since I've done this video, since the first part of it, I feel like I've come up with some pretty good solutions to improve this even more. So we're done with cutting. Let's go back to our live selection tool. Let's go back to our surface polygons tab. And let's click off the screen to deselect any selections, just in case. And now what we want to do is we just want to grab all of these sections that were cut. There we go. There we go. And now we want to right click. We want to come down to extrude inner. So let's click and drag to the left to extrude inner. Actually, let's undo that. My mistake. Let's go back to live selection, deselect off the screen. I forgot one important step. Press the U key on your keyboard. L is in loop. Let's grab this loop here, this first one, not with all of these polygons. This first ring. Right click. Let's come down to melt. There we go. And I just want to see what's happening here. That looks good. That looks good. And you know what? We can probably clean this up even more by coming back to our surface polygons tab. And let's grab all of these selections again. And then I'm going to right click, come down to, whoops. Going to right click, come down to melt. I don't want to disconnect, just melt. And let's see, let's right click again, come to extrude inner. Let's see what happens. Click and drag to the left. So right over here, we're getting some weird discrepancies here. And sometimes when you're modeling, this will happen. Now, I can see here the reason that this is happening is because that's where that weird cut happened. And so you can go in there with and just delete that one point, that one point selection. Deny that. So we want to make sure that all the edges are clean from that. Oops. So this one's got one too. There it is. So let's grab that one, clean it up. Let's see here. I think this one has one too. So, you know, this is a reason why the reason I saved this for last is because it's a little tedious, you know. It is, but we're doing it the right way. At least the right way in the sense that if we pass this off to anyone in you know, in Blender or in Maya or any other 3D program, they're not going to run into issues. You know, they're not going to have to clean up any of our mistakes. And that's really just the best practice of modeling is, the right way may take longer, but it ensures that the models that you create are essentially universally accessible. And they're not, they're not comprised of models that, they're utilizing proprietary elements, like, for example, the bool tool. All right, I think that looks good. We shouldn't run into that problem again. So let's go back to our Surface Polygons tab. That selection has been retained, so let's right-click again. Let's come down to Extrude to Inner, and let's click and drag to the left. And so far, so good. That's pretty good. All right, so we're just going to do 0.125 centimeters. That looks good. That looks good. Let's make sure to inspect. I don't see any distortions from our polys. Nothing's crossing over. Everything looks clean. Awesome. All right, so now what we're going to do with the selection retained, we're going to right-click, and we're going to come down to Extrude Inner. Now, if you remember, we extruded the bolt head to 5 centimeters. So we don't want to surpass that. So let's click and drag to the left. Excuse me. And generally, I like to go to at least 3 centimeters. You can take it deeper if you want. Let's just say 3.5 or negative 3.5 centimeters. There we go. And again, we're experiencing that bizarre Phong angle distortion. But we know how to fix that, right? So we're going to go back to the live selection tool. Let's click off the screen here to deselect in our perspective window. And now let's come over here to our edge selection tab. And so this is where this is the last stretch. So what we want to do is we want to press the U on our keyboard as in unicorn, and then L as in loop. And we just want to grab the inner part of this selection, this top selection. So there we go. There's that. And then we also want to grab the base. So remember, when we're making double selections, we hold down the Shift key. There we go. So now we have 2 selections. We're not quite done. So now we want to go back to our live selection tool. And we also want to grab the edges. So all of the corners, the ones that are pointing out and the ones that are going in. So let's grab the 4 corners that are pointing out. And now we're also going to grab the 4 corners that are pointing in. So there's one. That's not a corner, but this one is. There's a corner. There's a corner. There's another corner. Here's another one, and we only have 2 left to do. Now I'm making these multiple selections by holding down the Shift key while I make those selections. And that should do it. All right, so here's the moment of truth. Now with all of these selections made, let's right-click, and let's come down to Bevel. And we're just going to increase this. Let's try, instead of 0.05 centimeters, let's try 1 centimeter. Let's see what happens. That's a little too close to comfort for me, so let's reduce this to 0.75. Let's see what's happening here. So far, so good. Let's go back to our live selection tool. Let's come back to our objects manager and deselect to see if we have any distortion. And there's a little bit right there, but you know what? I think we're good. I think we could get away with that. If you want to spend more time with this, I know I'm probably going to go back and spend more time with it, but this is good. We're not seeing any noticeable visible distortion. And yeah, this is it. Look at that. Nice and smooth, nice and clean. It looks good. At least I think it looks good. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I really appreciate everyone following along. This is kind of a task, isn't it? But the end result looks pretty phenomenal. So, thank you so much for tuning in. And I apologize that it took so long to get to this point. But I will say that moving forward, I'm making more of a concerted effort to not leave anyone hanging. So that's on me. That's my responsibility. But with that said, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you have any questions regarding the process today and what it took to achieve this, don't hesitate to sign off in the comments section, and I will definitely reply to you as promptly as I can. I did have a few people who reached out to me asking for some help with some past tutorials, and just so you know, I have received your emails. I will reply to you. I'll make sure to take a look at your scene files, and I won't leave you hanging either. So thank you so much again, and I'll see you next time with another episode for Colorcubic and 3D modeling. Talk to you soon. If you enjoyed this episode of Colorcubic's Design with Purpose tutorial series, please be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes of design, video, animation, and 3D modeling tips, tricks, and techniques. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.